Good morning, everyone. We're going to start here by washing our fruit for our applesauce today. We're going to add some white vinegar to the water, and then we're going to let them soak for 15 minutes to kill any bacteria or anything that may be on the apples. This first round of apples has quite a bit of bug damage in it, so by soaking them it also ensures that any bugs that may be in there still will come out. These are organically grown apples, so it's expected to have quite a bit of bug damage on them. So this was the first day that I was processing apples, and I was realizing that I was getting pretty sick. We were coming down with the flu that I wasn't aware of yet, and so I decided I wasn't going to can the applesauce just in case. I didn't want to can any bacteria, so I just sliced up all the apples, tossed them in some lemon juice, and put them in Ziploc gallon bags. I ended up with 3.5 gallon bags of apples that day. And then I just froze those until I felt like I was ready to process them. And this is the second day. This is about a week after I started doing this. My dad came over. He helped in another video that we did, harvesting the potatoes and peppers and stuff from the garden. So while he's here on this day, we're going to finish processing all the apples and make them into applesauce and can them. This round of apples is from another farm local to me. My kids went apple picking, and we ended up with a ton of apples from that as well. So we have quite a bit of apples that we get to preserve today. My dad took over the peeling for today because I did my share of peeling, and he is like super fast at peeling. He used to do truckloads of apples when he was a kid with his family and make those all into applesauce. So he's a pro at this. I'm still working on my speed. I think this is my third year making applesauce and canning it. I'm so happy I learned how to do this because my kids absolutely love applesauce, so they go through this like crazy. And then they're sad when mommy's applesauce is all gone and we have to get store-bought. And this applesauce came out so delicious with these farm fresh apples. And when you pick them yourself, you get to choose what variety you like best to can, and then you can go with whatever flavor you like best of the apples. Like, we like the Macintosh best for applesauce, so that's mainly what we're using here. Now we're going to get this Dutch oven on the stove once this is all full and get a little water in there. I put probably about a cup of water just so they don't burn on the bottom. And then this is our crock pot full. I put the frozen apples in this, and I figured I'd just cook them low and slow all day. There's some more apples we cook up, and this is the first round of applesauce we got done. I got my jars here warming up with hot water in them. Now I'm going to puree the applesauce to make it nice and smooth. So my kids like a very smooth, non-chunky applesauce. And I love this Immersion Blender. It works so well. If you don't have an Immersion Blender, you could use a food processor or a regular blender. Now I'm going to get my water bath canner ready, and we're going to make our water just about as hot as our applesauce because you want them to be the same temperature going in so your jars don't break. I'm going to add some white vinegar to my water bath canner. Doing this ensures that we don't get any water stains on our jar for our finished products. Now I'm going to ladle the hot applesauce into my hot jars. We're going to bring this to a 1/2 inch headspace. I'm going to repeat this process until all my jars are full. If you see the brown chunks in the jar, there was a couple of like brown pieces on the bottom. It's just applesauce that got a little darker from the bottom, so it's perfectly fine. I also want to make sure I leave a little room for a half a tablespoon of lemon juice to go on top. The lemon juice is necessary to ensure that there's enough acidity in the applesauce, so when we can it, it'll be safe. We're adding this to ensure that this brings it to a high enough acidity that botulism cannot grow. Botulism cannot grow in a high acidic, low pH environment. Now we have to debubble our jars, just taking this debubbler and going around the sides of the jar. This will release any bubbles in the jar to get any excess air out. Now we want to recheck our headspace because it's going to change a little bit after debubbling. We want to make sure we're at 1/2 inch headspace again. So I'm going to take a little bit out of the ones that have too much in it and put a little bit more in the ones that don't have enough. The next step is to take a towel with some white vinegar on it, wipe down your rims. While you're doing this, feel for any little nicks in the jar because then it won't seal properly if there's any nicks in the top of the jar. So we're just going to wipe these all down, ensure none of these are sticky, so we get a proper seal. I got quite a bit of applesauce on these, so I'm just getting a fresh spot on my towel with white vinegar to make sure we get all of the applesauce taken off the jar. Now that that's done, we're going to put our lids on, followed by our rings. And our rings, we want to make sure we're putting on fingertip tight. We don't want to force these lids on at all. We don't want them to be too tight, and you don't want them to be too loose either, because then they can buckle either way, and then the product won't be shelf stable. On a few of these, I go back and check and make sure I didn't make the lid too tight. So once again, we want to make sure our water bath canner, the water inside, is the same temperature as our jars of applesauce. This way we're not breaking any jars when we put them in. You are supposed to can this for 20 minutes, plus I added 5 minutes for my elevation, so check your elevation, make sure you process for the correct amount of time. I also got 2 quarts of apple juice out of this. Now here I'm just taking the rings back off. This is the next day, it's already been 24 hours, which is how long you want to wait before you check your seals. I check my seals by just grabbing the lid itself and just pulling on it And if the jar comes up with it, then that means that it's sealed. If it doesn't, then it's not sealed. I have yet to have a jar lid failure. I also only can with Ball or Forjars lids because they have better success rates for sealing. And I don't want to take any chances because that would be very disappointing to lose a whole jar of product or more because I went cheap on the lids. Now I'm going to label these applesauce and the date that I processed them on, which was October 5th, 2023. We do have a few apple trees of our own that I hope that we can preserve up ourselves one day, but so far that has not worked out. This year the gypsy moth came and ate my entire apple tree, and I think that one may have died, but I do have a baby apple tree that they didn't touch, and it's probably about like 3 years old, so hopefully next year we might get a few apples off of it on its 4th year, but I'm not banking on it yet. We did have a pretty decent cherry harvest this year off our cherry tree that we've had for about 5 years as well. I got that at the same time as our first apple tree, and I was very happy with that. Now after these are all labeled, I'm going to wash them. I'm going to wash the jars with hot soapy water and vinegar, white vinegar, and this is going to take off any applesauce that might have got on the outside of the jars and make sure that we are storing clean jars, so there's no risk of mold on the outside of the jars or anything like that. I was expecting to get like 13 pints of applesauce and maybe a quart or two of apple juice, and we ended up with 16 pints, 16 and a half actually, pints of applesauce and 2 quarts of apple juice, so I'm very happy with that. The other half a pint went in the fridge, and then my kids finished it shortly after. Thank you for watching.